when we have good underpinnings, good technological underpinnings, we also need to have good tooling to deploy them, right? Because the customer is not going to spend a year figuring that out. Each customer, I mean, it's insane, right? It would.
Abnormal DevOps iterations.
And here we are, another iteration with the good old James Shubin. So first of all, how are you, James?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Here, happily doing my silly recordings. So
I like your intro.
I thought, I mean, I'm missing something now. Where are you working now? What are you doing in your work in these times?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'm working at a kind of strange company that you haven't heard of. They hired me kind of as a general infrastructure kind of consultant, and yeah, they have a product. I don't want to plug them too much because I didn't tell them if they wanted to be. I didn't ask them if they wanted to be kind of publicized or not. But yeah, there's a lot of really nice people, which is kind of what first drew me to them. They seem very chill and they're nice people to work with, good people, and they basically have been doing this website product for almost 20 years or just 20 years, but it was always very slow and not very big company, very small shop. And then with COVID, business really took off, and they started having lots of serious infrastructure problems. They have a lot of junior people that weren't exactly sure the best way to build certain things. And so I've just been helping them kind of with all of those various fires and problems and whatnot.
Okay. So this is the present. In the past, I mean, you did a lot of different works, many places, but everybody knows you for MGMT. Of course.
Yeah, nice sticker, yeah.
Nice sticker, worst name ever.
Yeah, it's true. As I was telling you before, I mean, I guess 3 or 6 months before I kind of officially announced the initial code, I was posting on the internet to ask if anyone had any suggestions for naming, but nobody came up with anything useful. So I named it something short to type.
Okay, short to type, hard to tell. So for who doesn't know it, what does it do?
It's just my, I was doing Puppet and stuff, as you know. I mean, when I was starting Puppet, Alessandro was already a big deal, and I was like, who's this guy? You would search for code and you would see example 42. I mean, really in the beginning. And so I was doing Puppet. I was trying to be good at Puppet like all these pros. And over the time of my years doing Puppet, I started thinking about how I wanted Puppet to be different a bit, because I was trying to push it a little bit further than it was capable. And I slowly started writing down some designs about how this would be different, this would be different, this would be different. And eventually, when I realized that the Puppet code base and the Puppet community was really static and kind of a dead end, I started building my modern prototype. And I've been doing it since. I wish I had done it a lot faster, but for various reasons, I've kind of taken my time and I've had to, have a day job to fund.
Yeah, it was the typical side project, which is not your full-time work, so can take time.
It should have been a lot sooner, but sorry,
okay. Mommy, it was my mother.
But, answer, that would be awesome.
No, not now. Okay.
Yeah, so it's useful for me. I'm enjoying using it quite a lot. It's beautiful to write a tool and then have it used in production for your own use cases. And right now I'm trying to make it a bit more friendly so that people who are not, who don't have the background and knowledge that I have understand what's going on and make it more approachable. So that's the current goal.
And if you can describe them, what are the main features? How is it different from Puppet? Or
so there's a few things. Basically, it works as a distributed system, so you don't need to have a central Puppet master, or if you want. The language itself is very safe, and it's a reactive language. So the tool itself, instead of, say, running Puppet over and over again, it can just respond instantly to changes. So it's both a lot more efficient in that it doesn't have to run repeatedly. It can run continuously, but also you can model time, right? Puppet never modeled time and how your infrastructure changes over time. And change over time can even mean parameters such as, scaling factor of a load scale or a load balancer or something like that. And we can do a lot of things. We try not to be dogmatic about how you should build your infrastructure. And by having a flexible tool that works in a distributed system or not, it's really all of these tools, for example, Ansible or Terraform, are really special cases of what MGMT could do. So if you really wanted to run MGMT over SSH and not run it continuously, you can do that. If you don't want to run it as a distributed system, you can just run it in standalone. It can do all of those things. So we just stepped back and decided what's the general architectural right design for a tool, and that's what I've been building. And it's really up to the users to choose how to use it, which hopefully isn't too complicated. But we will. We want to solve this problem, right? Like, what does infrastructure automation really look like in 10 years and 20 years? Is it solved, or are we going to be still fighting with Kubernetes and things forever and ever? It just doesn't make sense, right?
So the obvious question is, what is your opinion on that? What is the future, and we will solve the problems of the infrastructure management?
Yeah, I mean, look, I want, I guess a long time when we were young, to install a program, you had to download some source, compile it. It was a big hassle. Now you can do DNF install a package and it just works. That same ease of use does not exist for distributed systems and call it day two continuous automation, right? Like I want it to be just as easy for me to run a cluster of servers as it is, whether they're here in the cloud, anything. It should just be easy. Like my grandmother or someone's grandmother should be able to just, install a distributed system and have it keep working, because it's an important problem in society that we need to solve, right? It would just be crazy if we never solved this problem once and for all. And so I've been kind of maybe almost obsessed in figuring out, what does the solution look like? Is it possible? Can we achieve it? Is it too far in the future? And I think we're pretty close.
I wonder, isn't there some kind of implicit and complexity in distribution and diversity in systems like that, which makes it almost impossible to make it simple to handle them in a standard, easy, one command way. Yeah, unless they are strongly opinionated or.
This is the quote, right? This is the brilliant quote that you should advertise, what you just said. So there's so much complexity. And so how do you make it so that you simplify all those choices, all that complexity down to a single command way? And you're 100% right. And the problem is today, to solve for that complexity, to find a solution of that complexity, it requires, literally hundreds of thousands of lines of code. In Kubernetes, they think this operator pattern is the future. And to write an operator, it's one maybe small solution for some problem, but it's, thousands of lines of code or tens or more. And so whatever the problem is you want to solve for, I realized there has to be a better way to solve those problems. And so that's why in MGMT, we have this special MCL language, we call it. It's a DSL, so it's a domain-specific language And the rough idea is that it makes very complex programs much, much, much simpler to write. 10 times, 100 times, some number of orders of magnitude easier to write what would normally be a very complicated program. Because there has to be a better way of describing these things that we want to build. Because, as you said, and you're 100% right, they're very complicated. So first we build MGMT, we build this language, we build this engine that can do the work, and then we hand it off to the best people in the industry. We give it to you, we give it to, you know, all the people that have really, really understand this space. And those people will build new tools, really, that are built with MGMT. And those individual tools will be, you know, not trivially easy to write, but depending on how complex. And then people can use those tools to solve those problems. So one problem you might solve, you might say, I want to make it really easy to run a distributed file system at home for personal storage and backup. So that will be one module that you write in MGMT, one program. And that particular program will be opinionated and solve that problem. A different group of people, maybe a company, will use MGMT to build a different distributed storage system, which has more features for their enterprise, let's say. And I think that's how the world is going to work. It's going to look like that.
So you hide the complexity you leave it to the developers or the contributors who need to create their own, let's say, modules to handle the complexities of the specific tools or software behind.
Yes. Yes, and with the caveat that solving the complexity in a kind of low-level language like Golang, in comparison, is very hard, right? In the same way that we don't want to write web applications in assembly because it's just so far away from what we're doing. It would just be, you know, millions of lines of code. It would be insane to write a web app in assembly. We need a new way to describe distributed systems and infrastructure automation, which are part of the same problem, that is further away from Golang and further away from, you know, Puppet and all of these tools. So what's that new higher level language that helps us express ourselves more succinctly? I think that's what I believe anyways.
So that's the James way, so to say. So
that's what I believe. Yeah.
Okay. But okay. So let's say, besides this approach, which you plan with leaving to specific implementation and management of the complexity of the tools behind. I wonder also, let me just think while talking. There is always the problem of adapting to different use cases. If we talk about cloud providers or whatever, different clouds, and implementing solutions in a way that makes sense in an abstract enough way to cover different use cases rather than doing stuff specific with a very opinionated approach which works for you and maybe a few others which do things exactly like you. So all these complexities left to the eventual developers of the modules, and now they make them, how do you call the modules, these components which handle? Okay.
Yeah, for
sure. So you need a strong community support. How is going with it?
There's lots of problems still to solve. So I mean, I think the design is right, but that doesn't mean that we don't have bugs. That doesn't mean that we have every resource or module that we'd like to have. It's still early in that sense. But you know, if people hack on this, I don't think it's a dead end, technologically. A friend of mine gave me a great quote many years ago, which was solve design problems in the design phase. And I've really strived to do that, right? To think about what I'm doing early on, so that once you put in all the engineering work, you don't have to be 5 years in and realize you're building it wrong. So I think I'm building things the right way. Is my implementation of the function engine perfect? No, it's not, right? There's definitely going to be a new version of that function engine. It's part of the core MGMT execution engine, which is more efficient, right? A smarter programmer is going to eventually replace that, which is maybe twice as fast. I don't know. So there are different parts which, as we hit a bottleneck or as we learn something new about the implementation side, that we replace. So, for the record, I don't consider myself a world-class programmer. I think I'm pretty good, but I'm not an algorithmist. I'm a plumber. And for fun, I wrote the initial type unification algorithm based on some rough descriptions of how I understood it worked, but it was not an efficient implementation. So as the code bases got quite large, type unification was taking, like in some cases, like a minute to run, which is completely unacceptable. So I guess some time back, my friend who knows the kind of textbook version helped me rewrite that, and now even large code bases unify in some number of milliseconds. So it's very, very fast, and we'll have more of those things happen with more parts of MGMT as time goes on and as they become bottlenecks.
Okay, well, so I guess also in this case we will see what happens. Have you seen System Initiative, the Adam Jacob tool?
I have, yeah. I've known Adam for many years, and so I always sort of see what he's doing, and he comes to Config Management Camp, and I try and push him to do some live demos, and he'll be there this year as well. Have you played with it?
Yeah, of course. Actually, I think we also mentioned you in our session. Also with Daniel Clay Shaver. You are a returning topic in some kinds. I mean, don't pass the whole session talking about you, but so good things. You are a name.
I don't know. I'm just a guy trying to hack on something I believe in. I've talked about it with Andrew Clay. I've talked a bit about this with Adam. What do you want to know? What should we talk about? Andrew Clay is very smart, by the way.
Yeah, all the people which are here are smart, which I guess I host. I mean, not the host himself, but the guests definitely. So no. What I want to do, one of the typical questions which I ask around here is, how do you see the future of infrastructure? So our world, IT world, will evolve in the next 5 or 10 years. What kind of things will be handling?
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I'm a technologist. I'm not a. So I've learned reluctantly that the things that people use and that become mainstream are not necessarily the right things, because it's not based solely on logic and right and wrong and the right way. A lot of the forces in the tech world are based on money and power, and some companies have lots of money and a lot of power. So if you're a very big company, you can kind of use that position to influence customers to use various things, right? The obvious early example is Windows. I mean, Linux is in many ways better in terms of technology and freedom and so on, but Windows is still dominant in the desktop space, so the best thing doesn't always win, and it's not to diss the Windows engineers. There's lots of good engineering there, but overall it's still not the year of Linux on the desktop, which is sad. So in the infrastructure space, I really don't think Kubernetes is the right solution, but it is becoming very dominant. Kubernetes, Docker, those kinds of things. And slowly people are now realizing that it's very expensive and it's not helping them more than it's hurting them. And so people are really right now scratching their heads thinking, what do we do? And this is exciting for me because I'm trying to build solutions in this space. At the same time, I'm not, I'm not a private equity funded startup. So I'm just kind of doing my own thing and hoping that enough people take the time to see what I've done. And if they want to get value from what I've done, they have to invest time and money themselves, right? Too much in this industry, people just want something for free. And if it's not perfect and if it's not for free, they're not interested. And so, yeah, if we keep having this attitude, we're going to keep getting bad software, bad infrastructure.
Well, bad infrastructure. I mean, I'm not so pessimistic about it because if you think about how IT infrastructures were 20 years ago and now they are now, we did huge steps. And
are they better? I mean, are they more reliable?
Definitely.
You think so?
There is no comparison to what was happening 20, 25 years ago.
Maybe not 25 years ago. What about 10 years ago?
Okay, 10 years ago is different. But again, there are so many automations. I mean, so many battles we won in the IT operations side. Still a lot of problems and a rising complexity. I mean, we have systems popping, any kind of things popping up everywhere, more and more computer-related things that have to be managed. So definitely, it's hard. My personal opinion is that complexity is intrinsic in our world. Not because we can't do things without complexity, but because how it is now is complex under various points of view, and because there are many things to handle, many different applications, services, interactions between systems, and a lot of things are done by these systems. So these are not things easy to handle, to configure, to manage, to develop, and so on. But how we are handling this is so much better now than it was 20 years ago. 10 years ago, well, still we have progress. We have possibilities. The Kubernetes thing is a point. It's true that the problem is that not everybody has the needs of who did the Kubernetes. No, the Google needs are not the needs of 99.9% of the IT shops around, which still use Kubernetes. But also, we have to say that some of the things that Kubernetes allows to do before, if you wanted to do them, maybe you hadn't to do them, but if you wanted to do them, auto-scaling, load balancing, high availability, all these kind of things were hard to, much complex to handle. So in some way, Kubernetes has complexities, but makes these things much easier to do. So some commodities now.
Yeah, so I agree with you. So look, in the last 10 years, there have been lots of improvements for sure, right? Even in terms of systems engineering languages, we have Golang, we have Rust, we have like lots of improvements. Monitoring is a lot better. I mean, compared to Nagios back in the day, which was horrendous, we have a lot better solutions. And there are lots of areas that are better. But a lot of those things you talked about, I mean, 10 years ago, I guess I was doing DRBD with GFS2 and Keep Alive D running virtual IPs and like, what was it? Like RG Manager and CMan and that whole like distributed stack and building, remember for load balancing, I was doing IPVS. Remember IP virtual server,
Right.
the Linux
And
thing?
you needed all the knowledge to handle and configure these tools. It was not easy.
So, well,
You could do that. I was not saying that it was not possible, but you need a lot of knowledge in order to handle
maybe. Yeah, it might be true. I never found it that complicated. There was certainly some complexity, but yeah, I know. I guess I have to really think about it. But overall, we have reinvented a lot of things and made them very complicated. And now there's this monolith which you have to like throw obscene amounts of YAML at, that became so complicated that we are templating the YAML. So just understanding code bases becomes like, oh, that's templated code. It's generated from some tool, and that data comes from another tool. And so, yeah, there's definitely some improvements. It's indisputable. But I'm not convinced we've won as much as the marketing people have tried to tell us. So
yeah, I mean, it's back to the point. How many people really need all the features which these tools provide? And second is probably how many people now can actually manage their own workloads without even handling this stuff, because they everything managed on the cloud, paying what has to be paid and so on.
Right.
So in some way, the complexity is a matter of the provider of your infrastructure, which is not anymore maybe something that you have to handle directly. So under some points of view, I guess that could be considered an improvement, no? A commodity is a service. Infrastructure as service is not a new word, but it's not definitely a concept which is...
Some people might say, and I might be one of them, that Kubernetes was designed to add a lot of complexity, such that if you made any success in porting your app to run on Kubernetes, you would soon find that it was inefficient or difficult for you to do so, and you would be compelled to transfer hosting of your app from on-prem to Google Cloud or into Amazon, where it's cheaper. And that was part of the design, right? And the reason I'm convinced this was the plan was, if you look at Kubernetes, especially in the early days, it just came with a simple round-robin scheduler, and all the fancy scheduling and node placement stuff. Like it still even isn't possible on your own in the default kind of open source Kubernetes. So if you want the efficient schedulers and all the cool features and you just have to host that on Google or Amazon. And then the kind of joke was that this was Google's plan to get people to use its cloud, right? Because if you could run your containers on-prem, it would be easier to run them in Google Cloud. But the unofficial joke is that Amazon ended up making more money hosting Kubernetes than Google, right?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if that's the real reason behind, but in some way, it makes sense. I mean, if I think, I mean, whenever I see, the one-click easy solutions to problems, the demonstration of products that do things in a lot of stuff with just one line of YAML, a single command, or a click in a web interface. My usual thought is, I mean, that's the typical demo use case, where you have something done in the way you want, and you have the big abstractions done on top of some complexity which are buried below. When you have to do things in the way that fit your use case, you have to deal with these complexities in some way.
Right.
It's hard to find, probably it's impossible to find a easy one-click solution for a specific use case, which is based on what you need to do. So either you adapt to some kind of standardization, which probably makes sense also. Maybe instead of doing things in your own way, you try to do things following the predefined way, which is easy to handle, easy to configure, easy to work with. But when you have to start to do things in your own way, you have to deal with the complexities of everything which is behind, which is, auto-scaling, load balancing, either with Kubernetes or with Seaman or the other tools used. I mean, how terrible was the Red Hat cluster in the times in some way? If you think about reliability, how much downtime was done by setting up a cluster which was supposed to keep the cluster in its availability rather than
there were some parts which were not great, but I think a lot of it was. I think actually a lot of it was very good, right? So
yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I found out some old HA solutions in a normal world were creating more problems than the problems they were solving.
So here's the thing. I think the tools that existed, like, DRBD and GFS2 and those things, I think those were excellent. What was not excellent was how you deploy a whole beautiful stack, right, of these things. And that was why I was excited about Puppet, because I understood how those tools worked. I did. Other people didn't. That's okay. And so I was using Puppet to build that entire stack. And the end user who would use that Puppet code wouldn't have to know how all those tools worked necessarily. I mean, it helps to have some knowledge, but how to glue it all together. And I was building Puppet modules that would just deploy that whole stack, provision the two machines, set up the partitions, set up DRBD, set up TPLID, set up all these things. And that's when I got stuck. That's when I really got stuck, because the dynamic nature of, setting up something here, waiting for both things to be installed and then cluster them together, that fancy automation was impossible in Puppet, basically.
Yeah.
Virtually impossible. And so that's how I realized, when we have good underpinnings, good technological underpinnings, we also need to have good tooling to deploy them, right? Because the customer is not going to spend a year figuring that out. Each customer, I mean, it's insane, right? It would same reason OpenStack kind of didn't really take off, because to deploy and understand how OpenStack works, you would need like a team of engineers, right? It was too complicated.
And to upgrade it was another
good luck. Exactly.
into the unknown.
Yeah. So that's for me when I realized it was really about automation, right? And once we have really good automation, then the people that build the beautiful, pieces underneath that we need can get their tools consumed properly, right?
That's right. There is the usual problem. These abstractions, these layers of things which allow end users to do things in an easy way. Let's say the platform. Now we talk about platform engineering,
right?
But somewhere the complexity lies. Can be hidden below,
right?
But there is something which has to handle that. And when things don't work or have to work in the way you need, you have to put your hands in the complexity. And so there is where I guess there is not a real solution. You have to handle that. Maybe there are improvements on the things. We make things easier and easier. Also, somehow in the lower levels, so to say, not only for the end users, but also where we manage things. But there will not be the single, fast, quick, and easy solution. Or maybe there will be, but again, there will be someone else taking care of the shit below, so to say. If I can say.
I mean, like, if you want the Star Trek computer, we have to get, we want to get to Star Trek computer level, right? So we have to figure out how to solve these problems so that we can eventually have that that more beautiful future. So here's a cheap plug, but yeah, go ahead, tell me.
No. The point is, in some way, you remind me that I don't need to know how a computer works in order to use a computer. So in some way, I don't need to know how our infrastructure works.
That's the problem with too many infrastructure people these days. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, but again, maybe if the infrastructure becomes not a thing that you manage, but something else which you pay for, and someone else manage it, that's probably the way out. Which is happening all the time with the cloud stuff, cloud-based services and everything.
Yeah, but
anyway, you still need to handle something and do.
But doesn't that worry you? I mean, like, everyone in the world is basically putting all of their computing on, like, US East 1. It's just like completely crazy.
All the internet is going, everything is going to the wrong directions, compared to the early times of the internet. We are thinking about decentralization, freedom, communication, knowledge sharing, and everything. And as you say, there are these big concentrations of computing in the big hyperscalers, and that's definitely, in terms of internet, some kind of anti-pattern, if I can say that. Same for open source. What's your opinion about what's somehow happening to the open source? Same idea and concept in some way, with all these things happening with double licensing, forks.
I mean, look, open source has been co-opted by for-profit corporations, because the joke was the joke was free software is free as in freedom, open source is free as in labor, and the companies of the world rightly realized that open source was a way of getting code and functionality without paying for it, right? And this is the problem that we have right now, is no one wants to pay the developers to build things. And I don't have a solution to this problem. I wish I did, but people don't want to pay. If you can get it for 1% less money, or whatever.
Big companies can pay for support and everything. I guess one part of the problem is when companies use the open source work of others to make money, not with their own products, but with the open source product. Yep. And that's where things become a bit nasty.
Exactly.
And where I start to understand a bit more some choices, the HashiCorp, the choice and so on about licensing, because I don't know. I still have mixed feelings, because the point is, all these products, if they weren't open source, they wouldn't be used. They wouldn't have had the success they have now. No, if the HashiCorp software weren't open source since the beginning, it would have had user base 1/10 of the users, which is now
less. I agree with you.
So that's the first thing to consider. On the other hand, having your software, you develop your software, and then there is another company using your open source software to provide the services using it, which is somehow competing with your own services. That's a problem. And so, I don't know. It's but the good old, let's say, innocence times seems like they are gone for long.
Look, it's the companies, as you say, they'll pay support to other companies and whatnot when they're forced to, right? Like they're not going to voluntarily pay any serious amount of money. I mean, even the big companies, they give a few 100,000 or something to support a few developers here and there, but it's not. It's nothing compared to how much code they consume. It's what are the solutions? The solution is everyone writes really strong copylefted code, so that the companies are forced to release their changes. if companies would start being, benevolent and actually paying for the code that they're using, but there's nothing to force them. So why would they, right? So I don't really know what the solution is. Governments maybe get involved, start funding people, have there be a tax that requires companies that use code to donate some amount of money to strong copylefted projects. I don't know the solution. I'm interested in solving the technological problems, the funding problem. I've not found a good solution. If I did have a good solution, I probably would have, had a lot of money at this point. Because the solution for me to fund MGMT is, if I want to take a bunch of money from VCs, I've got to have some way to potentially force customers to pay money, and it's hard to force people and also be completely free software, free, like libre, open source software. So I don't really know what the solution is.
Okay, so many questions, no answer.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had those answers.
So, I mean, it's not. There is this thing. I always ended up my discussions here talking about AI because we keep on talking about AI.
Right.
And we have all opinions about AI, but more or less, I start to think that more or less they are always the same. No,
Yeah.
We know what we have to all the AI discussion about what is the all the. But sometimes there are some interesting points which maybe are more not so common or not so spoken. So my question to you is, tell me something about AI which I don't know.
I'm not an AI expert. I've been experimenting to kind of have
not
some
technically
opinion.
necessarily, also in the widest sense.
Something you don't know.
Or
I don't know that there's much that I will know about AI that you don't. I could maybe say something that your viewers might not know. I believe that so people talk about AI safety and all of these things a lot, right? And how you should be worried about the singularity of this or that or whatever. And I think that it's true that at some point we need to care about AI safety in terms of humanity and existentialism and survival and that singularity. I think that most of the people talking about, not all, but most of the people talking about all of that are using it as a distraction, to distract from the actual short-term problems, which are very real. So having these large language models enables people that have hoarded private personal data and private corporate data, namely governments and other entities. They're using these models to, make decisions on a very, very, very large scale that were much harder to do before, right? So it's making it cheaper to analyze what people are talking about, cheaper to analyze what people are thinking about, cheaper to predict, which corporations they should invest in, all of these things. And those are the worries, right? The worries for me are the asymmetrical control of power that's going to be possible with these models.
Can I just to talk about this, because let's elaborate in some way. There is some kind of democratization of these possibilities. What was possible before to only who had the money and the powers, now in some way is possible to many more people. The tools, the language models are around for everybody to use. The data to feed them and to fine-tune them is around for is much more accessible than before. So all the powers that these models provide to analyze the data and give you the possibility to do decisions based on that is much more available now than before. So in some way,
I don't agree. I mean, there's a small number of foundational models that are controlled by a very small number of people. All of these models are proprietary. They need a huge budgets to be able to train them. And if you want to use them as a user, yeah, of course you can pay some money to OpenAI, but you have to go through them to use the model, right? And even if you go through them, the model is not going to obey you under certain circumstances, right? So if you really want to do whatever you want, it's only a few companies that are able to do that.
Yes and no. And so it depends on the level where we work on and where we interact with the things, because, but first of all, also I would say, not the creation of the model, so to say, but the fine-tuning and the inference is more and more possible for everybody. Now NVIDIA is launching these $3,000 small box, 1 petaflop operations. You put it on your desk, and you can do an inference server in your home. And so, in some way, at the point, the model can be the model of the big companies, but can be also an open source one. And also, open source models are more and more reliable, useful, done better. So there is a lot of models around. So if you think that this whole thing, at least for the big public, has started 2 years ago, and there is already basically a new industry created out of nothing in terms of services and works and activities around the AI, not to say what you can use the AI to do things. So, and the things that are possible now after 2 years are much. 2 years ago it was impossible to think about running a model or better, not for the common person like you and me. Run a model on your computer and use it locally rather than asking on the interface in some kind. Now it's possible, and it's easy. And
there's some democratization that has happened, right? Of course, even simple coding stuff is a lot more accessible to some people. And so, of course, there's some democratization. But at the end of the day, the important or the most important parts are still under control of the big companies, and they're all proprietary, right? So it's like there's a big cake, and they know that they have the big cake. But to appease everyone else, they'll give you a few crumbs, and they'll say, pay us $20 a month, we'll give you a few crumbs. That's the way I see it happening, right?
For the big language commercial models, yes. Yeah, in some way, it's true that probably is going to happen with AI what happened with the internet. In the early times, a lot of companies, a little bubble, but if you think about what happened with the internet, the winners took everything and become the biggest companies in the world. And the same is going to happen with AI. The winners will take it all. Still, the crumbles are. I don't know. So I don't. So it's not good to say they are bigger and bigger in some way for our small hands like us, but allow more and more people to do things, like the internet in some way. If we think about the powers that how many single people out of nothing could benefit from the internet, from the accessing the world audience and doing whatever. I guess the similar things may happen with AI for everybody trends, which we are seeing here. But yes, I agree. The big ones will keep on having the bigger and the best and the monies and everything.
Yeah. They don't have query limits. They don't have safety limits. They do what they want.
They do what they want. But
and you and me, we're gonna get Clippy, the paperclip.
The paperclip.
That's what we get.
No, because actually Clippy will be much more smarter than us.
I'm sorry, Alessandro. It looks like you're trying to start a revolution You've been reported to the thought police. I mean, this is the future that we will have.
Okay. Yeah, in some way, usually if things have to go wrong, they tend to go wrong. But on the other side, I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball. So one of the questions which I always also do is what persons I should invite to this thing, these abnormal DevOps iterations. What are
Who should be
people
invited?
worth listening to?
That's a good question. Who do I listen to? I just feel like I'm scrolling my social feed to see who has posted some interesting things. I will make a better list and get back to you, because there's lots of interesting people that you should definitely listen to. And I'm not sure which ones would suit your podcast more. But yeah, it's a. I didn't prepare for this question, but it's a great question. I'll think of some names for you.
Okay, I will wait for them. Is there anything which I haven't asked, which you would like to reply to? Some question which was not done, but which you would have liked to be asked.
Alessandro's a great guy. I think he's found this great podcast niche. He went from being puppet extraordinaire to podcast extraordinaire. Do they know about your Config Management Camp podcast coming up?
Config Management Camp podcast?
Yeah.
No, I don't know about that.
What do you mean? On the second day, we're doing the live podcast.
There at the conference.
Yeah, the conference. I hope you know about it.
Yeah, I know it because we are going to. But it's not live. It's live in the conference, but it's not live.
So they know.
Yeah,
about
we
that.
are going to do that. Yeah, it's thanks to Chris who.
Yeah, when we were in the meetings organizing and discussing it, and we're like, wait a second, we should get Alessandro to do his thing at the conference.
Okay, so you were in the committee deciding for this.
Of course.
Bravo.
They wanted to kick you out and say no, and I said no, we must have the Godfather.
So it's thanks to you. Great.
We have that. We have the conference coming. If people want to buy swag for Config Management Camp, they have to buy it basically today maybe is the last day, or tomorrow, and they will pick it up in person at the conference.
Yeah.
So
how would you for it?
You got a hoodie?
Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll be at FOSDEM if anyone wants to hack with me on something MGMT related or whatever. I'll be at FOSDEM, I'll be at Config Management Camp, and then right after Config Management Camp, I'm going to take a short vacation / hacking adventure in Paris just for a few days, just before I head home. So, s'il y a quelqu'un en France qui veut hacker ensemble ou manger du beurre ou n'importe quoi, just let me know.
Voilà.
Naturellement. Yeah. Next year, maybe in Italy, but this year in France.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Also in France, at least you can speak your own language in some way. In your part of Canada, what is the official language? French or?
Canada has English and French as both official languages.
Both official, so that's fine. Wonderful, James. Wonderful. So thanks for the discussion. I mean, it was nice to talk with you again. And
thanks for having me.
It will be nice to meet you in person again.
I'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah.
In a few days. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Ciao.
Ciao.
Abnormal DevOps iterations.